There's a book called Dying Inside that when people who don't read science fiction ask me, what should I read? I don't like science fiction. I say, read Dying Inside. It is a science fiction book, but it's a science fiction book that you don't have to be a science fiction reader to read.
I know that.
It's a real novel.
Yeah.
And I guess as a technical achievement, as a writing job, I think that's the book I'm most proud of tonight.
Well, tonight, certainly I'm most proud of the Drop of the Heart stuff. That's the one you're all going to get to take home. It's hard for me to separate the better books because I think of them very much as parts of the whole. But I think I'm most pleased or proud of that series. And also, it's a book of mine called Small Town that I like a lot.
Yeah. I just want to ask about plotting again. How extensively do you plot? Do you sit down and do a one-page outline? Do you do a multi-page synopsis? Or do you just throw something at the wall and see what sticks?
I just sit down. I'd like to have something of the story in mind when I sit down, besides just the opening. But the opening's enough. If I write that and it comes to life, and that's the book I'm meant to be writing, then something will occur to me and it'll continue and it'll be fine. I don't outline. There have been times when I've outlined, but no, I don't. I find that all it does is tell the unconscious that I already know what I'm doing here. I don't need any help from you. So I'd rather not do that.
I used to do fairly elaborate outlines. One so elaborate that it's been published and republished as an object in itself. Yeah, the Lord Valentine's Castle outline was so elaborate that it's a textbook model of what you do for an outline. But as the time went along, my outlines got shorter and shorter, and basically, if I had the beginning and the end, I think the middle's going to take care of itself. I've been doing this for 40, 50 years. But I did need to know the end. I can't build a bridge without knowing which shore I'm heading for. But I scribble them on the back of old envelopes, and then I sell them for lots of money. Yeah.
Who do you read for enjoyment?
Not science fiction writers. For fiction, I don't know, wild assortment of people, anybody from Graham Greene to Charles Dickens to... I read very little contemporary fiction because I don't like the contemporary world very much. A couple of years ago, somebody was collecting writers' epitaphs. We were asked to write epitaphs for ourselves. And the one I wrote was Silverberg, who spent so much time writing about the future that he was condemned to live in it. So I'm going on a trip next week, and I'm taking a novel by Anthony Trollope with me to read. That's what I read for pleasure. I read him for pleasure sometimes. I don't like science fiction.
And you, sir?
I usually don't answer this question and try and avoid it as much as I can because...
Is it safer to say, who do you loathe?
No, that I don't want to say at all. The reason I avoid the question is it's usually that any time I answer it, I'm just going to wind up losing friends in the process if I forget to mention it. Well,
What genres?
What I'll say is that what my favorite book so far this year has been, and that would be The Informant by Thomas Perry, which I liked a lot.
Yeah. I'm a major Thomas Perry fan, so happy camper.
Sure.
How do you feel about e-books?
I'm a big fan. The question was how do we feel about e-books. I'm a big fan. I must be. I just recently arranged for the e-publication of something like 45 out-of-print books of mine, and for the publication as e-originals of two new books for writers, which represent previously uncollected columns of mine that are now gathered in e-book form. I think one effect of it is that it allows one's backlist to be available forever, and gives the reading public access to books that wouldn't be available otherwise, and especially wouldn't be available otherwise as publishers stop printing backlist titles. The shrinkage of
Old books.
mass market paperbacks, they've disappeared. If you go into a chain bookstore, all I know of my work, there used to be 2 full shelves at Barnes & Noble of my various paperbacks, and now there are generally 3 books. That's shrinkage. So I'm happy to see e-books.
Maybe your question can be taken in several ways. What do you think of e-books? I'm with Larry. I think they're wonderful for writers, especially writers who bring a lot of books. I'm putting as much as I can on there. I don't have a Kindle. I don't have any use for e-books myself. I like turning pages. I like putting a bookmark in. But I'm an old guy.
You can put a bookmark in with it.
Yeah, you can. But you can't turn the page quite the same way.
Faster. After books there.
They don't stick together, do they?
Hmm?
The pages don't stick together like real books.
No, and God knows they did on an early work.
But
You throw it over the plate belt high, you can expect it.
I don't want to read books electronically particularly. I don't even want to read things on my computer. When people send me, here's my new story, I say, fine, send me for that. Then I won't read it. But unwillingly or not, I live in the 21st century. I'm a professional writer in the 21st century. I think this is a marvelous development for those of us who would like our audiences to continue being our audiences.
I know when Westlake had Hard Case Crime was reprinting a couple of his early books, and a bookseller publisher asked him, he said, well, why are you doing this? There's not enough money involved to matter. Why would you bother? And Don's line was, the difference between being in print and out of print is the difference between being alive and being dead. And so I would just as soon have the working print.
I just assume be alive. An option that Don didn't get.
No, well, he did for a while.
A long while.
Yeah.
What's the beauty of your books? What's the reason of you two guys getting together right now? Because I used to go book signings and it's only one author. Now you two work together.
Well, it's not a tag team kind of thing. I don't much like doing signings, and I rarely bother doing them. I'm an old curmudgeon, I do what I damn please. But Larry said, I'm going to be in your neighborhood, and why don't you come out and join me? I said, great idea. Let's have dinner, and we'll do the signing. So that's why I'm here.
We figured it'd be fun.
Yeah, yeah, but we
So
don't.
far it has been.
We don't go, we haven't signed any books yet. But we don't go around the country doing this as an Abbott Costello, you don't know Abbott Costello.
They don't know Ever Charlie either.
Yeah, that's even more esoteric.
Yes, it is.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes,
I was wondering what both of you thought about, I was just looking at the book you wrote about, that gave advice to writers, and one of the pieces of advice you gave which struck me was if you edit too much, you take the life out of your writing. And that really hit me. I mean, I don't write fiction, I just write nonfiction stuff, but I've caught myself doing that a lot, and I was wondering if you guys both, because I guess both of you are kind of fast writers. I mean,
you
relatively
might
fast.
say that.
But I mean, how do you think about that, or how do you avoid taking the life out of your writing when you're editing?
Well, in the really old days, I would write only one draft. Certainly writing the erotica. If you're going to write a book in 6 days, you don't then just sit down and retype it all. And in an act of what we in the trade call chutzpah, I would put a sheet of white paper into the typewriter with a carbon paper behind it. I know these are esoteric terms now. And a yellow sheet behind that, and just write the book, one draft. By the time I got to be about 32, that became hard to do. And I started to revise. And eventually, I did so much revising that it drove me crazy because we used typewriters. And I would get half a page down and say, oh, that's no good. And I'd pull the thing out of the typewriter and type it all over again. They invented a thing called a computer. And that made life much simpler after 1982 or so when I began using a computer where you could scroll back and fix that bundled page. But basically you have to know when to stop fiddling. Not only will you drive yourself crazy by revising endlessly, but as you say, you'll take the life out of the book. I can only tell you it's an intuitive thing. The really professional writer knows this paragraph's okay. Go on to the next one.
And it varies enormously from one writer to another. Stanley Allen was an absolutely brilliant writer. He would sometimes write the first page of a short story 30 times before he moved on to the second page. He was very, very painstaking that way, and that was how it worked for him. Other writers write first drafts and send that in. And neither way is right, neither way is wrong. You find out what works for you.
It can become a dysfunctional way of life if you revise compulsively. You've got to control that. Some writers, even old pros, will get into that dysfunctional mode where they cannot stop fiddling. I had that happen to me once with a very troubled time in my life, 1983, and I started a novel. I was using a computer then, and I wrote the first page about 12 times, and just when I got it right, there was a power failure, and the first page disappeared. And so I rewrote it, but you know, when you lose a page, you never write it again as well. That was the perfect version. And after that, I learned, A, get a different kind of computer that backs up automatically as you go. Back then, it didn't do that. And B, leave well enough alone. After the 13th time you've written page 1, you've probably written it 8 times more than it needed.
I still just write one draft, really. I'll work over it as I'm going along.